Hello there. So the SPL rosters for next year have finally been released. Hi-Rez spent all this time building up to their big grand reveal, and then they left in the teams in the Smite client in the most recent patch. So an absolute pisser for them in their big fancy unveiling of the teams, but it's excellent for us because I wasn't sure I could wait a whole 3 days to find out. And it's fair to say the teams have not disappointed. There's been some really unexpected stuff in there. So let's take a look. So before we get into it, I'm going to be going through the teams in order of spiciness, which is basically going from the more boring teams to the teams where the teams you're really here to see. And also, I've not watched anyone else's reviews or breakdowns on these teams. I wanted to make sure that what I'm saying is my own opinion and I'm not just parroting what you've heard elsewhere. So for those who are just here to see the teams, bam, there they are in all of their glory. You can never say this isn't a high production value channel. I spent a whole 2 minutes making that table, so you're welcome. So yeah, there are the teams. The team names have been memed on a little bit. I actually kind of like them in their own special way, and I really hope that the Solar Scarabs are the best team out there, because I'm going to be spamming the get bugged hashtag every time anything ever happens. And now my cat, who literally never hangs out with me, has decided to come and join me. Look at the baby. Okay, cat interlude unfortunately over. So yeah, there's all the teams in all of their glory. I know it's a bit overwhelming having all the players in a big fat table in your face, but we're breaking them down shortly, and there is a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. Okay, so the first team to talk about is going to be the Olympus Bolts. You may recognize this as the Renegade squad from last year, but now with variety replaced with Haddox. So this was a team that I don't think anyone was particularly surprised to see continue in the SPL. If you've watched any ranked gameplay over the last few weeks at the beginning of Season 8, these guys have been slamming the queues together non-stop. Jake and Haddox have been really good friends for a long time. I think they used to team together back in the day, so it only makes sense that Haddox's SPL debut is, you know, with Jake and with the sort of mentoring core of Barracuda, Ven and Lasbro. So firstly, to talk about Haddox. Haddox is an SPL level player, and he has been for some time, to be honest. You may remember that he was actually Sanguine's sub during their Excellent Worlds run a few years ago. He's been playing at a really high level for a very long time. He's a bit of a beast in lane, but with any new player, you always question how it's going to be over the course of a season. You might be good in lane, you might be good in an average game, but you've got to be a good teammate as well, so it'll be interesting to see how him and Jake do. But I have no doubts in his ability to compete at the top level, but solo is a really strong role this year, and was last year as well, so it's going to be a bit of a baptism of fire, so I hope he's ready for it. So kind of general expectations for this team. It's easy to forget that this team had a pretty rough year last season. They had such a good run at Worlds where they looked so dominant against teams like Sanguine that you think of them as this pretty top team, and you know, rightfully so. But it's easy to forget that they nearly missed both playoffs. They had playoffs against United both times and just scraped through. This was not an easy season for them at all. It took them a while to figure out their playstyle and how that fit into the meta. Now they have the advantage of being a whole season ahead. They've had a chance to realize the playstyle they like, and that is aggression. They just W key, W key, W key. And that's good. They now have their model moving forwards, but the problem is now it's a new meta, new map. There's a lot to figure out. So I expect a fairly similar season to last season, at least at the beginning. I think early on they're going to be one of the stronger teams, given that they've got a lot more synergy than just about every single team out there, and they have their playstyle nailed down from last season. But at the same time, I still think they're going to have that trademark Renegades inconsistency that haunted them throughout last year. They're going to be more consistent, they're going to be a better team than last year, but I don't think it's going to be a totally different season. We're not going to suddenly see them pushing top 3. I think they're still going to be sat kind of roughly around the middle, but with the potential at LAN or at any sort of tournament to go and take the whole thing. I think it's going to be a very similar season, but these guys have the potential to blow up. I mean, teams that stick together have a very good history in Smite. Look at PK. As SK, as Trifecta, very average team. As PK, they went back to back, so, you know. And onto the Jade Dragons. Welcome to your number 1 team in the split. This team is the Ghost team that you know and love. except now with Twig replaced by Horrorwind. And that's the main talking point for this team, that swap. And I think it's a swap that benefits both parties. I think it was a good experiment, and they nearly won a title with it. They were one game away from winning the whole thing. So, I mean, it's ridiculous for me to be criticising it. They won both playoffs, finished the season in first place, and were one game away from winning the world title. That was one game away from the perfect season. So for me to be chatting shit is very rich, but here they are with Horrorwind in the mid lane instead of Twig. Now, in terms of the other lanes, just to quickly talk about them, there's not much to say, frankly. These guys are good, if not the best in their role, just about all over the board. These guys are going to dominate the early game, and they've got late game potential to pop off as well, which is what makes them such a scary team, which is why they were so successful last season. But onto Horrorwind, and Horrorwind is a player that I have personally rated really highly for a very long time, but he's been on these dodgy teams for a while now. There have been a couple of false starts. I remember thinking when he joined the Dignitas team in season 6, which was Trix, Tank, Cuvo, that kind of team. I remember thinking, here he is. This is the season that we're really going to see the best of Horrorwind. And he had a very good season, but not the sort of season that you remember, not the one that had those really big moments. You're like, whoa, that was the moment that I remembered. Horrorwind is sick. And last season with United was a bit of a shit show, frankly. I mean, a lot of that wasn't really their fault. It was a lot of roster changes, and they made roster changes to people who were supposed to come over from UK, and then lockdown got worse, blah, blah. Regardless, it was a bit of a weird season for them. So it's one of those things where I know a lot of casual viewers think, who is this Horrorwind guy? Why do people rate him so highly? And I think now is his chance to properly show it, because he is really good, I promise you, and it's not just on Janus. But now he needs to show it. Now there are no excuses. If he doesn't perform this year with that surrounding him, then, what is there to say? But the truth is for Horrorwind is that with a team like that, there's only so much he needs to do. I mean, you can basically just play anything. Just don't feed. Don't do anything too stupid, and you'll probably be okay. But what's really important for them is that for all of Twig's good points, I think the one thing that he really lacked in mid was an ability to just win games by himself in the way that a player like Dardes, for example, does. So it meant that should Pandacat, Finecase, Sanford Soccer might fail as their primary win conditions, they couldn't fall back on their mid like other teams did. Like, I think a really good example of this was Radiance last year. I mean, with adapting Benji, Aurora, and Cyclone Spin as your other 4 players, you've got win conditions all over the place. But BMT had this ability to carry games should things start going wrong. Like, you remember that Merlin double kill against Renegades? That lives rent-free in my head. And his Scylla player Worlds was phenomenal. It was unbelievable. He had a really good Worlds, not just on Scylla. So they have had that ability to have a mid laner come out from nowhere and carry a game, whereas I don't think that Twig had that last season. So it'll be interesting to see if that really makes a difference in, about to call them Ghost, in Jade Dragons run this year. And the other thing I want to mention about this team is Kabom back in the coaching role. Kabom, for those who perhaps haven't been around the scene for that long, Kabom is a bit of a goat when it comes to coaching. He coached a hell of a lot of winners, including, I'm pretty sure it was the Splice team that won back in Season 5. And very smart guy, really gets the game, and very good personality for coaching. Very good at sort of being the bigger man as far as I could tell. Obviously, I don't know him, never met the guy, but I rate him really highly in terms of coaching, so I think that's a brilliant pickup for this team. No disrespect to Slaney, I think Slaney has been excellent for them in the past, but yeah, I think that's a really, really smart pickup. And a good one because he was working as an admin at Hi-Res last year, so I didn't even know he was going back into coaching, so to snap that one up, good bit of business. So what are Jade Dragons' expectations this year? Well, I think more than any other team in the entire league, it's very, very obvious. It's to win Worlds. These guys have come too close too many times for that not to be in their head rent-free. They want to win Worlds, nothing else. I imagine they would sacrifice their league finish, their what's it going to be called this year? MSI placement, blah blah. Any of those mid-season tournament finishes just to win Worlds. And this time there are no excuses. Everyone's in their correct lane. Everything is how it should be. This is their time. I think these guys are going to dominate the regular season. 1, because they are a very good team. And 2, because they have the synergy having played together before, which is really helpful, especially in the early weeks where teams are really finding their footing and, learning the meta, learning the map. Coming in with the team synergy as well makes things a lot easier, because maybe a strategy you're doing isn't working because it's not good in the meta, but if you're a new team, you don't know that. You might think maybe the team just isn't working, or vice versa. So I think that's going to be really important for how they start. So yeah, they're going to be a bit of a bully in the regular season, but will they win Worlds? That is the only question that really matters to this team, I think. I think they have all the chances to, they have all the potential to. But the rival curse. Ooh. Second name change. Maybe the second name change will be the one to finally shake that curse from their shoulders. Okay, now moving on to the Atlantis Leviathans. This is Old Sanguine, so you've got Julio in the solo, Panatom in the jungle, Shinto in the mid, Rongyu in support, and we have a role swap with Yakor moving to ADC. So the spice really begins. This is a really interesting one. When I heard that all Season 7 rosters had gone through some sort of change, this was the team I couldn't really believe. I thought, how is Sanguine, the Sanguine team that's stuck together for so long, going to split up now? But as far as I understand, Manitroid wanted to leave. Actually, I don't know why I'm saying that, because I think I just heard that mentioned somewhere. I have no idea if that's actually true, so I don't know what the story is. I'm not going to guess at it. But yeah, here we are with the change, with Yakor moving to ADC and Julio coming in. So to quickly talk about Julio, I've said before in my breakdown before Worlds, I think Julio is a class player, and I'm glad that he's finally getting his chance to show his stuff on the SPL. You saw him against Renegades, soloing Variety like 3 separate times. Dude is a beast, slams the Warriors, loves pressure, basically going to be filling a very similar role to Yakor, because he was a bit of a... I was going to say he was a bit of a warrior main. That's not true. I think he was just best on his warriors, but he loved his Cthulhu's and stuff like that. One thing I will say about Julio, I'm not entirely familiar with this playstyle, so maybe this is speaking out my arse a bit here, but I think he's more of a sort of pressure player rather than a team fighty sort of player like Yakor is. More of a Haddix than a Yakor. In my head, Haddix is someone who just basically slams that lane pressure constantly. So it'd be interesting to see how such a team fight heavy team like Sanguine adapt to that. But yeah, Yakor is now an ADC. I'm a bit sad to see that, because I thought Yakor was brilliant last season. I think he came in with probably the most to prove of anyone from Sanguine, and I think he proved it by a mile. I say that because in Sanguine's good runs through Worlds and stuff like that, he was unable to get a visa, so he was the one that was regularly missing, and I think the one that most viewers didn't recognize, didn't think, oh, it's Yakor, Yakor's a beast. He had the most to prove in terms of, I am good enough to be in this league. And I think he proved it and then some. Dude was a beast last season, especially on the Warriors, especially on the ones like Cthulhu. Had a really, really good season, a very good player. So I'm sad to see him not strive on into solo lane and, you know, push to be one of the best in the world. But with that being said, role swaps are always a bit risky. I can't think of many role swaps that have really gone swimmingly over the years. I mean, there are ones that haven't gone particularly wrong, like you think about Panda Cat going to mid, he was just a natural there. But with that being said, there is precedent for solo to ADC swaps going well. I mean, look at Cyclone Spin, for example. And I think Yakor is the sort of player who's good enough to change roles and still be a top contender. He's got that general smite knowledge. He's quite a complete player. So I think he's going to be fine. But the problem is that with a league this competitive, you wonder if being fine is going to be good enough. Is fine going to be okay? God, that was awful. Because you want win conditions in every single one of your roles. It might be okay to be fine in terms of finishing sort of mid-table, but if you want to be pushing for a world's win, you need to have world beaters everywhere. So you wonder if this is going to be good enough for the team. Netrade was such a big part of Sanguine's success last year, so I think they are going to miss him, especially early on. I expect this team to have a fairly rough start. Role swaps are tough to learn and they're tough to adapt to as a team. Rongyu and Netroid have been playing together for years, so they will have a lot of understanding that now needs to be relearned by Yakor. Not saying it's impossible, just saying it's not easy. But again, I think we're going to see much the same sort of style of team fight, slam the massive team fights, win late game, as we saw from them last year. Now onto the Valhalla Valkyries. You've got Ducky in solo, Johnny in mid lane, Zeros in mid, Irafa and Emelito returning. The NRG duo lane is back. This is a bit of a ragtag EU team. You've got Johnny and Zeros reuniting from Beltsap. You've got Irafa and Emelito coming from the NRG, Epsilon, Panthera, whatever you want to call them, legendary, double back-to-back worlds winning with Emilito getting the MVP. This is as storied of a duo lane as you can literally get in Smite. And then Ducky in the solo. I love Ducky. I couldn't resist. There is so much to like about this team. There's also this general feeling of that I can't really escape. I can't quite put it into words, but that's just how it makes me feel. So let's start with the good. Johnny, I think, is the next breakout star in the jungle. Dude is a beast. He had a rough time against Renegades in the regular split, and I think his lack of SPL experience showed, and I think it will continue to show for the first few weeks, but I think he is definitely good enough to reach the heights of the rest of the league. So it's going to be really interesting watching his growth. I still think Zeros is a world-class mid laner, and I'm really happy to see him back in the league because dude's a beast. Dude was one of the best in the world. I keep saying dude. He was one of the best in the world for a long time before he took a couple of seasons out of the league. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see where his skill level lays compared to the rest of the league now, because that performance against Renegades really made it feel to me, how much has the SPL improved and moved on in recent years? Are we going to see these old players just prove to, not be good enough? But I don't think so. I think Wolfie showed that last year. I know Obey had a bit of a stinky season, but I still maintain that Wolfie had a really good season. He was, in my opinion, one of their shining lights. So I think this is going to be a testing year for Zeros, but yeah, I think he's definitely good enough to get there. And then you've got, of course, the Emilito Rafa legendary duo lane. You might think, hey, I thought Rafa was retiring. Well, he did, and then he unretired. He said on Twitter that he really did retire, fully intended to, but for those who perhaps don't keep up the news as much, Rafa's house was flooded. There were some really bad floods here at the beginning of the year, and it basically wiped out the bottom floor of his house, all of basically thousands and thousands of pounds of damage. And so you can't help but feel that rather than going into kind of post-SPL salary uncertainty, the idea of being able to live in a different country for a while, save up money to repair your house and move back with a guaranteed salary was a big part in his reasoning to go back. But this sort of leads me on to my first worry about this team, and that is their drive. I think players like Johnny and Zeros being back in the league, they will be motivated as hell to be the best team there. But players like Rafa and Emil, I'm a bit concerned about. Rafa, you could see towards the end of last season, was not enjoying himself, was not having a good time. Obviously last year was a shit year for everyone involved because of COVID. They were stuck in their houses with getting to see 4 people just about all year long, just grinding Smite and not going anywhere else. That's a very quick way to fall out of love with the game. But his drive, you could tell, just wasn't there like it used to be. And it's the same for Emilito. I'm surprised to see him back in the league. I thought he was basically done with Smite. I thought he wanted to play some casual sort of SML style games. I did not expect him to see him back on the big stage. And the question is he good enough to be there? Yes, we've seen that. We've seen that in the past, that he can be one of the best. Will they be trying hard enough to be the best? You do wonder, because you sometimes see these teams where you feel like the drive isn't there and they tend to languish. Teams that are trying harder will always do better because they will be on the ball with new strategies, new metas, and they will be scrimming out of their arse. This team, you wonder whether the want to succeed is still there. And talking more about Emilito, this isn't the first time we've seen him in the North American SPL. He originally wasn't going to move back when it first moved in Season 6, but he came in halfway through the season to join that E-United team that was Emilito, Callus, Big Man Tings, Ice Ice Baby and Benji. And this team was a solid middle of the pack team, better than the worst ones, but definitely not as good as the top teams. And to be entirely honest with you, I don't think Emilito stood out. Obviously a class player capable of being one of the best, but is the want there? Is the drive there? That's what concerns me. Generally, I think this is probably going to be one of the lower end teams throughout the regular season. Once again, they have that quality where it's you never know how good they can be. It's not like a team where the quality just isn't there. You know that their kind of max skill cap is a bit lower than most. This team, their max skill cap is right up there. I mean, you've got world champions out the wazoo and you've got upcoming talents. So these guys have the potential to be good, but just something tells me in the regular season, these guys are going to be fairly low down. Not bottom, not languishing right at the bottom, but you wonder as things get harder, as the year goes on, winter sets in, you've been playing for months and months and months, you wonder how this team is going to cope Mentally, you've got Rafa, who clearly is a bit burnt out on Smite, Emelita, who I'm surprised is even playing, Zeros, who had really big troubles in that PK team of Season 6 to the point where for Worlds they replaced him with the coach because they just didn't want to play with him anymore. You wonder how this mental side is going to play out over the course of the year. I think they're fully capable of being absolutely fine and having a good season, and I think having players like Johnny who really want to succeed, who really want to prove themselves, is going to prove to be very helpful for mentally keeping them on track. But I don't know, there's this little voice in the back of my head that's going, oh, I don't know, there's something funny about this. So yeah, I would say sort of mid to lower table team with the potential to pop off at any LAN in the way that NRG just made a living out of back in the day. And now on to one of my favourite looking teams of the entire league, the Oni Warriors. Doesn't this team just look right? Doesn't this just... something in my heart tells me this team is meant to be. So Nika, Dades, Vote have all taken the mentality of if you can't beat them, join them. After getting smacked by Neilmar 2 years in a row, they said, right, fuck it, that's it. Let's get him in. So yeah, this team is the remnants of PK and SSG sort of fusion dancing together. And I think it's some of the best of both of those teams. SSG was such a good team. I know people won't quite remember how good they were in future because of their unfortunate LAN runs, but this team is nuts, especially Dades, Nika and Vote. Those are three of, I mean, Cherio's obviously not playing, so I can't include him, but these guys are nutcases, and to see them teaming up with Fred and Neilmar. Fred had a brilliant season last season. I know a lot of people were saying, oh, you know, he's not really been that great, but I think it's just a lot of, I don't know, didn't quite agree. I thought he had some really, really good games. Maybe not the same Cuvo Fred we're used to seeing back on the old Dignitas squad, but I think he was still a bit of a beast and definitely underrated. And at Worlds again last year, Neilmar proved what a beast of a player he is. His brain is enormous. I love Neil. I think he's a great guy, and I think he has proven to be such strong support in terms of playing, especially playing the late game, playing the overarching top-down game rather than the kind of second-by-second, play-by-play style of support that you might see in a player like Jake, for example, who's more focused on playmaking, setting up his team. Neil just seems to play the big picture so well, and I think this team is... could this be the one that gets Dades, Nika and stuff like that their first world title? I think there's a lot of potential here. These guys are insane, and these aren't players where they used to be good and you're thinking they will eventually come good again. These guys were all at the top of their game towards the end of the last season, so I expect them to come in really hot. Obviously, with a whole new team, there's going to be some synergy issues, and especially because the new roles are ones that really impact each other. For example, Dada's having to get used to a new jungle and support, which are the two roles that most directly impact how he plays. So it'll be a bit tough to settle in for players like him. These guys are going to be real contenders. My one criticism of this team is that it's full of a lot of players who can be very on and off, and it means that I think they're going to have a bit of a tumultuous season. So I don't think they're going to be the most consistent team over the season. I feel like they're going to be one of those that's their ups are massive, and then they just have these games where it all goes horribly wrong. You've got Vote and Nika, who are both very bad losers. I've watched enough of their streams to know that they are tilters extraordinaire. So yeah, without someone like Cherry to really keep them in line, you wonder who's going to be the sort of disciplinarian on this team. Not that every team needs one. These guys seem to get on really well, and Neilmar's so good for that. The social glue. He's just such a, you know, chill guy to be around, that I think they're going to get on fine. But you know, I think there are going to be these moments, these kind of low moments in the teams. But yeah, I think this team is brilliant. I just love the look of it, and I'm really excited to see them play. These guys are going to be wanting to finish right at the top. These guys are going to be challenging for Worlds. I think they're going to be a real contender to this Ghost team. They've got the quality to definitely... well, they could make it 3 times in a row for Neilmar to become the first player to ever go back to back to back. Now onto the Camelot Kings, and we've got the UK squad featuring Netrioid. So you have Variety in the solo lane, Captain Twig back into the jungle, Big Man Tings in mid, Genetics finally moving to SPL in the support role, and Netrioid coming from Old Sanguine. And here we have our first brand new team. Not a single one of these players played with each other last season.
This is a team that really want to prove themselves, more than maybe any other on this entire list. This is a team of players who all have a point to make.
And this is a team that I really don't know how to feel about. So I think the easiest way to discuss it is going through role by role. And let's start with Captain Twig finally back in the jungle. Like I said, when it came to the Jade Dragons, I think this had to happen. I don't think Twig was happy in mid. Well, he said right when they discussed the fact that he was going to be moving mid, he made it very clear that it was not his ideal situation. He wants to be a jungler. He is a jungler. So it's good to see him back where he belongs and surrounded by some very good players to make his transition back a bit easier. Twig's style has always been to bring out the best in the players around him, to support everyone around him as he goes. I mean, that is a bit of a meme now because people just seem to think that he only plays sort of, setup gods. He can carry as well. Don't let that get twisted. He can be a carry as well, but that's historically how he's been known, to bring out the best around him. And if you're trying to bring the best out of people around you, it's good to have players like Big Man Tings in the mid lane, who I think is one of the best mids we've got. He's insane, and we saw it in Radiance's run at Worlds. I know they didn't get past PK, but no one did. So that's not something to be embarrassed about. B&T is a beast, and I think Twig together with him is going to be something to be a bit scared of, because he's going to bring the setup. I think we're going to see a really good year out of Tings. Variety back in the solo. Variety is a bit of a funny one because he is still one of the greatest solos to play the game ever. But when I talked earlier about the team with Iraf and Emelita, I talked about the drive and the will to win, and you wonder if Variety's in the same boat. I wonder how much he's really ready to grind out another year. You can't help but notice that his performance, especially in lane, was not the greatest last year. He just seemed a step off the pace, in my opinion. And this is someone who's always been a step ahead. You think about when he was on Dignitas, I think a lot of the reason why Dimmy was eventually kicked from the old NRG team is because he got dunked on by Variety. This is when Variety was at his peak of his powers, and he was a massive part of why that old Dignitas team was so successful. So to see him being a bit off the pace, I mentioned how Julio soloed him like 3 times on Rat. Yeah, you wonder. I think this is quite a big season for him to really reinstate. No, I am one of the best. I can be right at the top again. I really hope he has the drive to do that, because he obviously is capable of it. So I think it's going to be a big year for him to see where he really sits in the general scale of things. Genetics is back in the support role in the SPL. He has been here before, very briefly on a United, where it was a bit of a rough ride because they picked him up on the assumption they would be able to bring him across at some point, especially for lands. Play on 200 ping in the regular season. Not ideal, but there would be some sort of upside to it in the end. But as COVID got worse and worse, especially in the UK and the US, 2 of the places worst hit by it, it became more and more apparent that just wasn't going to be viable. So Genetics was dropped by E United in a bit of a horrible swap when Snoopy ended up in support. I don't want to talk about it, but he's back. And if you remember how Genetics played for E United, you'll remember a lot of weird shit. Not jank, just different. I think his signature pick throughout was Horus. Horus was where he made his name. For example, where you'd see United pushing down the right Phoenix and then Horus ult to the left Phoenix and kill it before the other team could rotate. This is the sort of stuff that Genetics is gonna bring. This big brain, try something new. I don't want to say wacky because I'm not from the 1940s, but these wacky style of different strategies. So I have always rated Genetics really highly, but I'm not going to lie, his performance against Renegades did make me wonder, is he going to be on the pace for SPL? He will eventually get there, I'm sure, but how quickly is he going to get there? He's been one of the best SML supports for years now, and I think he really deserves a shot, but I think it's going to be a steep learning curve because the supports at the moment are more aggressive than they've ever been. I mean, look what Jake did to him. Obviously it's hard to judge that performance because they're playing on 200 ping, and it cannot be stated how difficult that is and how much of an impact that's going to make on you, because it means that all of those little plays that you make, like Sobek dashing when you hear someone blinking behind you, you can't do, because you hear the blink, you press the button to do it, and then there's this big pause, and then you do it, and by that time, you know, you're too late. And that's a really specific example, but what I'm trying to say is that you can't judge someone's performance when they're playing on that sort of ping. So, you know, I think once again, he's another one who's really got a name to make for himself. And then Netrioid, he is definitely the kind of the one that sticks out of this lineup the most, given that you've got 4 people from England and then someone from South America. So you wonder how it's going to work language-wise. I know Netrioid's English is fine, he'll probably be fine, but comms-wise, he's used to communicating in Spanish, so it's going to take a while to get used to, and, you know, Variety's a Scouser, so early on there's going to be a slight issue in terms of comms, in terms of how easily they communicate, because having to communicate in a second language is not easy for anyone. But one thing we don't have to worry about is his ability. Netrioid is a beast, and he showed it last year. He was definitely one of the best hunters of the year. So that's nice, at least don't have to worry about his ability, but you wonder about how he's going to fit into the rest of this EU team. Definitely one to kind of keep an eye on. Like I said, we don't have to worry about his skill, but these guys have to live together all year pretty much, so it's not just about skill anymore, it's about you as a teammate and how you fit in with the players around you. But like I said at the beginning, this is a team with points to prove. Variety wants to prove that he's still one of the best in the solo lane. Twig wants to show that he's still one of the top junglers and should have been Ghost Jungler after all. Genetics wants to show that this is his time in the SPL and that he should have been in SPL for the last few years. And Netrioid wants to show that his move out of the Sanguine team was worth it. Tings, on the other hand, is just really good. Doesn't really need to prove anything. So where are the Camelot Kings looking to finish this season? I think we're looking at a very mid to lower table tier team here. Jesus. We're looking at a mid to low tier table tier team here. Jesus Christ. These guys aren't going to be at the bottom, I don't think, but I think they're going to have a pretty rough start to the season. At being a brand new team, you've got to build from the rock bottom in terms of synergy. So it's going to be a tough start for them, I think, but they have the talent to be up there. But this is such a competitive league. I think that not having the synergy is going to really kick them early on. Again, this is a team that has enough carry potential to pop off when it comes to lands, but I think this is going to be a bit of a tough season for them at first. I'm thinking hungry for more sort of vibes, if you know what I mean. Especially because it's going to be quite difficult to get Netrioid integrated into the sort of UK stance of the team. So I think it's going to be a slow start for the guys, but they got the talent to make it work. Okay, now on to one of the most eye-catching rosters of them all, the Tartarus Titans. So you've got Benji in solo, Scary D in the jungle, Paul in mid, Aurora in support, and Cyclone Spin in ADC. Wow. So the obvious point here is that this is the remainder of the Radiant squad, mixed with the kind of offshoots of the PK back-to-back world champs. And this is a funny one, isn't it? This is very much not a team I saw coming at all coming into this. So there's a lot to say about this team. So let's just start by going through the roles with Benji. Benji good, no more need be said. He's been one of the best solo laners since he's been in the pro scene, back on the enemy days. He's insane. I've said it before how much I rate Benji, and I think he's going to continue to have another brilliant year because he real good. He got Paul in the mid lane, and yeah, he's quite good as it turns out. I know that's a controversial opinion, but it turns out Paul is quite good at this game. I'm obviously being facetious because he is about as good as we have in the entire game. There is nothing I can say here that you don't already know yourself, because if you watched Worlds, I'm having like 1,000-yard stare just thinking of those silhouettes. Yeah, he's quite good. Aurora and Cyclone Spin sticking together for how many years is it now? Have they been together since Splice? Anyway, these guys clearly respect each other and clearly recognize that each other are one of the best in the world in their roles. They clearly have a lot of faith in each other, and rightfully so, because they're both insane. I don't think we saw the best from Aurora last year. I don't think we saw him ever reach, full Aurora status where he just carries games by himself. But I think that was because he was playing a lot more of a selfless role than usual. With a player like Adapting in the jungle, who is clearly more of a sort of carry-orientated jungler than other junglers Aurora's had in the past, I think he took it on himself to be more selfless, playing perhaps a bit more like Rafa, where he's just willing to die, play supports that are going to die lots of times, but just to set up for the team. Whereas now I think we're looking at a squad where we could see the old Aurora. I think this could be the return to form for Aurora. He's clearly good enough to do it. I think he is in one. If I'm doing the kind of Mount Rushmore of Smite, I'm definitely considering getting Aurora's face up there. He's been right at the top for as long as he's played, so I think this duo lane is, yeah, you know what you're going to get with it. It's going to be good. So let's talk about the kind of eye-catching bit of this team, and that's Scary D in the jungle. Scary Goat, Scary Dizzle. I really, really rate Scary D. I think he had his best season ever last season, so I'm surprised to see him move out of solo. Maybe he just thought, one, there wasn't a good space for him in rosters. Maybe that's usually what pushes these roster changes, is that you're kind of forced just by nature of how the teams are falling. But that's obviously me just chatting at my ass. I have no actual idea about that, so yeah, we're going to see a solo laner move into the jungle. That historically hasn't been a role swap that goes very well. Very, very different roles. You go from probably the most lane intensive role on the map to the least. Yeah, it's a tough one to get used to. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better team to have around you to help guide that transition, but I think it's a funny one. Scary D is definitely mechanically talented enough to pull it off, but the problem is there's so much to learn, so much to know about jungle, which is nothing to do with mechanics. It's something that just, you have to have this sort of bird's eye view of the map at all times and know exactly where people are, where you should be in comparison to those people. It's a really hard thing to learn, especially for someone who's been playing solo for their entire career. So I think it's going to be a pretty tough transition for Scary, but there's a big but here, and that is the other 4 players on his team. They are really good, like really good. So I think Scary can't go wrong if he just says, you know what, let's just not feed, play setup for my team, and basically, you know, do everything to make the rest of the team succeed. Because with Paul and Cyclone Spin behind you, I mean, those guys can carry you to victory by themselves. I imagine we're going to see him play a lot of frontliney gods, a lot of dive, very similar to how he played his sort of style throughout Worlds, where it was get into the back line, cause havoc, because he's really, really good at that. Him and Benji are probably 2 of the best at doing that. So I think it's going to be a good season for Paul and Cyclone. You know, they're going to have so much room in their backline because they're going to have Scary and Benji just fucking shit up in their front line. So that's definitely the biggest question mark about this team. Is Scary going to be able to pull it off? Like I said, not a role swap that has gone well in the past, but Scary is a really good player. He's been slamming jungle in ranked. I think he's good enough to do it, but it's going to be a tough start for them. It's going to be a slow start. I feel like I'm saying that for a lot of teams. When they're building synergy, it's going to be really tough. I mean, these guys have a lot of sort of inbuilt sort of understanding between them, with Benji, Aurora, and Cyclone having their, you know, how many years have they been together? A few, at least their second year straight with Benji, I think 3rd or 4th of the Aurora and Cyclone. So these guys understand each other. Paul and Scary, obviously good friends, having played together for 2 years now. So it's not like these brand new teams where they're going to have to learn from step 1. But at the same time, it's going to be a rough start for Scary, I think. But I think this is going to be another really good team. We're looking at one of your top 4 teams here, if not top 2. They've got the quality to go all the way and take the whole thing. So don't get it twisted by all of this. Oh, is Scary D gonna be good enough? Blah, blah, blah. This team is right up there, right at the top. It may not be from week 1, but over the course of the season, their quality is going to shine through and they're going to be a class act. And finally, we are at the Solar Scarabs, my favourite name of the bunch. Get bugged. This is the console glow-up team is what I want to call it. These guys are historically known for console, but they've officially made their move into the PC SPL. You've got Solo War Troll in solo, Layers in the jungle, Boronic in mid, Inbound in support, and Zapman in the duo lane. Now there's a bit to be talked about with the Zapman story here, but I'm not going to talk about that much here. I'm going to instead start with the team as a whole, and that is that this team, as Boronic has tweeted out saying that this team is going to be the most criticised team, but they want to prove them wrong, and he's not wrong in that aspect. I think if you're looking down the list of teams, this is the one that immediately stands out to you as being the weakest on paper. But there is a massive difference between a team that's weak on paper and lacks potential than a team like this. I mean, you look at Obey's roster last year, and I think it was just sort of obvious from day one that they were going to have a bit of a stinker of a year, because I don't think their total skill cap as a team was ever high enough to really challenge anywhere above bottom spot. What I'm trying to say is that their skill ceiling wasn't really contesting with some of the best teams, and it meant that Although they could beat teams in, you know, an occasional game here and there over the course of a season, their average level of play was never good enough to be anything really than 7th or 8th. Whereas a team like this, I think they're going to be the bottom team throughout the most of the season, but there is a ton of potential here. These guys are hungry. There is no team on this list that's going to have more of a desire to win than this team. These, especially people like Solo or Troll, who got kicked off of Renegades last year for, you know, not being a great teammate. Leias, who's been fighting to get into the SPL for so long now, and Baronic, who's also been doing everything he can to get into the SPL. These guys want to be here more than just about anyone else, and I think that's going to be a really important thing over what's going to be a very long year. These guys are going to be fighting and fighting, and I think their room for growth is enormous. These players are really talented and they have the chance to prove themselves and show where they are on the whole world stage. So let's talk through the roles here. We've got Solo or Troll in Solo. This is a really interesting one because he is a player who's clearly good enough to be in the SPL. He had a very decent start to the season on Renegades. Inconsistent for sure, and I don't know what word I want to use for it, but just kind of lacked consistency. Would have these games where he did really well, but would also be a bit too impulsive. Didn't quite consider the game from the overall bigger picture in the same way that I think players like Benji in the Solo are so good at doing. But I think the most important thing is separate from all of that, and that is how he was as a teammate. Barracuda is someone who's spoken many times about how he hates roster changes. He's a massive proponent of sticking with the team and building. And so for him to kick Solo or Troll, well, not him individually, but as a team, for them to kick Solo or Troll is a bit of a warning sign, because by the sounds of what they said that he was struggling to listen to advice and, you know, perhaps wasn't responding in the right way when it came to altering his play or taking criticism. To me, that gave this signal that perhaps he's a bit immature. And I mean, he's fucking allowed to be. You know, he's young. He's one of the younger players in the entire league. He's allowed to be a bit immature, but now this is his moment to prove that he has grown up as a player. When he was kicked off that team, he was mad. He was pissed, and rightfully so. You know, you got your chance to be in the SPL, your chance to prove yourself, and you're suddenly back in the SML. It's not a good feeling. So this is his moment to stick a big middle finger up to the Renegades guys and say, look what you missed. I'm sick. You're shit. You know, he wants to show that he's good enough to be here. How is this going to work team-wise over the year? This is what he really needs to prove more than anything else. Now, Leias in the jungle. Leias slays. I think Leias has been SPL quality for a while. People thought he was going to be the jungler that came on to Obey when Weekend was kicked. So, yeah, it's good to see him finally make his SPL. Is this his debut? I think it might be his debut. That feels criminal to say because he's really, really good. But again, I looked down the list of junglers. I think this is a bit of a story for this team is, hey, this player is good, but I looked down the list of players also in his role, and at the moment, as it stands on day 1 of Season 8, he's probably the weakest, other than, you know, role swaps like Scary D. I think his performance against SSG at Worlds proved to me that he can hang with some of the best. Obviously, they lost the set 3-0, but I think they put up way better of a performance than anyone expected from them. I thought that was going to be the most one-sided set of the entirety of Worlds, because this was a team that people didn't expect to come through from the North American SML against one of the best teams to ever do it in Space Station. But they put up a really good fight, and Leias, especially early on the Guan Yu jungle, was causing a lot of trouble to SSG. So yeah, I think it'll be good to see how he does over the course of a year to really get a feel for how good he truly is. But I think he's been SPL quality for a while, so glad to see him hit. Now, Baronic is one of the few players, because I'll be honest, I didn't pay that much attention to console Smite over the years. And so when I know a player's name from console, that's a very good sign. Some of the few console games that I watched included Baronic, and I remember thinking, making a mental note in my head saying, this Baronic guy is really good. Very naturally skilled player. I remember there was a game where he was playing Janus where he just was not missing an ult. With each second that went on, I thought, this guy is nuts. We are going to see him in the SPL very soon. Now, that didn't quite pan out because I remember that was a few years ago, but here he is now. I think, truthfully, this was supposed to be Erupt Crimson, who is a very, very good mid laner, but if you're talking about the kind of Chad console mid laners, you're talking about Crimson, you're talking about Baronic. These guys seem to be the cream of the crop from the console scene, so I'm glad to see him in the SPL. And this is someone who, if you read any of his tweets, he wants to be proving people wrong as much as possible. These guys, they know they're going to be criticised. They know they're going to be seen as the weakest team. And I think they're wearing that as a bit of a badge of honour. They're probably going to end up sort of sitting bottom of the table for a while, but they know that with every week they're going to be getting better and better. And I think Boronic is a really good addition. A good mid laner is a linchpin to any team's success. And I think he's got it. Dude's really good. Now on to Inbound, and I kind of said a lot about Inbound when it came to my breakdown for Worlds, in that he was, I think, the weakest player of last year's SPL, but also one of the most improved by far. He had a really good, especially the end of the season, the last few weeks and his performance at Worlds I thought were really good. That being said, I am quite surprised to see him back. I thought at the end of the season, to me, he was clearly an SML quality player, but truth be told, the support role isn't the deepest at the moment, and I'm not sure that I agree with myself saying that he's an SML quality player mostly because what I'm thinking about is performance at Worlds. Obey looked way better. Obviously, they lost 3-0 to Sanguine, so you can't say they looked brilliant, but they looked a lot better at Worlds than they did throughout most of their a long season. And I think Inbound was a massive part of that. On Athena, he seemed to be a level ahead of his old self, whereas I thought the old Inbound was sort of just reacting to what's going on around him, seemed to be a bit off the pace. He seemed to be the member of Obey that was most clearly kind of seeing things coming in advance, planning for them, setting up big fights. I think of his Athena play in particular, he was just taunting left, right and centre, and all good things that happened from Obey at Worlds pretty much flowed through Inbound. So I'm glad to see him back in the league, to have another chance to show that was his kind of breakout moment. Hey look, I am really good, and here we go for the rest of the season. Now, for all of the good talk about his performance at Worlds, it did also feature a few of the Inbound calling cards, which is just randomly getting picked. I think of a time when he was playing Sobek and he just appeared near their red buff and just got picked by Sanguine, and it was one of those where it was like, why are you there? What's going on? So that's what he really needs to iron out, which is very good because he is paired with Papa Zatman himself, who has been consistently one of the best in terms of raising young talent in the league. Zat makes it very clear what he expects at all times, where a player should be, where they shouldn't be, and he knows his stuff. He's been around for just about as long as Smite has existed. Now, I can't go on talking about Zatman too much without mentioning the drama that's gone on. For those who don't follow stuff on Twitter, Zat tweeted that basically he was supposed to be on a different team, and that last minute, when he went to bed, the teams were settled and he was, on a different team, and then he woke up to find that the last minute, while he'd been asleep, the team had been changed and he was now not on a team, and he was let in sort of last second by this team, by this console runoff team. And I don't know any further detail than that, so I'm not going to sit and guess who the teams might be. I have thoughts in my head, but I'm not going to spread drama without knowing anything about it. So I'm going to leave that there. But yeah, I think Zatman is a really important addition to this team, because when it comes to shot calling, I mean, everyone laughs at the Zatman end calls, but generally throughout the course of a game, you see that Zatman is a massive part of PK or SK's comms. He's a really... People think of Zatman as this aggro, constantly going in sort of voice, but that is the old Zatman. The new Zatman is a lot more measured. He's a lot more about being calm. He's a lot more about making sure that when you get some sort of win, that you get the correct reward from it. So if you push a certain amount, you kill certain players, he knows whether you're getting a tower, whether you're getting a Phoenix, whether you're getting the Fire Giant, and which one of those is best to do. And I think that's going to be really important for this team, because when you see these new teams come through to the SPL, they might have all the talent in the world, all the mechanical talent, but the stuff that they miss the most is shot calling. They don't have that voice who has been there forever saying, no, this is a bad call, I don't like this, we should be doing this instead. And so I think it's going to be really good for him to be the sort of, you're going to have the super aggressive new players who want to prove themselves, make the highlight superstar play, and you're going to have the, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the calming influence of Zatman saying, hey, let's calm it down, this maybe isn't the play here. So I know he didn't want to be there, but I think that's actually a really good addition to have Zatman there. But yeah, truth be told, this is going to be the bottom team, I imagine, for most of the season, because they are learning the league, learning their roles, learning a new season, learning to play with each other on that team. So it's going to be a tough start, but I think they have the potential to really pop off as the year goes on. You've got a lot of talent here, and that's what's important. I would take being a team that is bottom with a lot of raw potential yet to be realised over being a mid-table team playing at the absolute top of their game. And that's what this team is going to be. They may struggle early, but they have the ability to really go off. I think a lot of this is going to come down to inbound and layers, at the two most roaming players that will set the pace of the game, as everyone loves to say. These are the two people who are really they've got to bring out the best in everyone around them, and I think they can do it. It's just going to be a question of whether they will. So I've rambled on for way too long, but that is the breakdown of the rosters as I see it. There's probably something huge that I've missed, and other people are going to be saying in their breakdowns, oh yeah, well didn't you think about the fact that blah blah blah, and yeah, sorry about that, but like I said, I wanted to avoid everyone else's opinions. I wanted to make sure that what I'm saying is what I think. Normal, edited, fancy schmancy, highlighty content, it will be coming soon. I just wanted to do this given that, you know, it's exciting, it's happening now, it's all popping off, so thought I'd give it a spin. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, let me know. If you never want me to do this sort of stuff again, then, you know, also let me know. I might cry, but I imagine a lot of you will have opinions as well. Who are you most excited to see? Who do you think is going to be top? Who do you think is going to be bottom? Get your predictions in for the World Championship next year, so you can say, back in February 2021, I saw that the Solar Scarabs were going to carry from Game 1, top of the league, going to win everything. Get your predictions in now, down beloweth. And yeah, like I said, more proper edity stuff coming soon. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I don't know what that was, but bye.